Hi, welcome to Quietly Thinking Out Loud. Um, I'm working on a project this week, so today I had a meeting with them. It's a think tank unit, a group of young, smart, curious, and fun. It felt like I had a brain gymnastic while facilitating conversation. So it's a good day today. And have you ever asked yourself this question? What really matters in life? It sounds like one of those questions people tend to ask when they become older, or perhaps after life has given them enough experiences to stop and reflect. I think when we are younger, much of life feels like trial and error. At that stage, we know very little about ourselves, so we move through life experimenting, trying different things, making decisions, and sometimes making good choice, and sometimes learning through mistakes. And I suppose that it is simply part of the journey. Sometimes I think about life through the image of three rings. If you look at a tree, at the very center, that is the core, the beginning. And perhaps our own beginning looks very similar. At the center of our lives is the family we are born into, the place where we first learn how human beings live with one another, how relationships work, how trust is built, how kindness feels, how conflict appears. And of course, not all of us begin life in the same way. Some people grow up surrounded by warmth, kindness, and love. Some begin life carrying more difficulties than others. But regardless of how we begin, life keeps expanding outward through school, friendships, teachers, college, work, or the society itself. And slowly, year by year, season by season, new layers begin forming around that original core. The experiences we gather begin teaching us who we are, what we enjoy, what we dislike, what kind of people bring peace into our lives, and what kind of work feels meaningful, and what kind of life feels true to who we are becoming. And as we grow older, we also begin learning through our own experiences, our own mistakes, our own decisions. Sometimes life teaches us through disappointment, sometimes through success, sometimes through realizing that what we once wanted is no longer what we want today. And perhaps that is how we gradually begin understanding what we truly value. But understanding ourselves is only one part of life. I think the next part is about choice. Because life constantly asks us to make decisions, and every choice carries cost, sometimes financial cost, or opportunity cost, or emotional cost. And sometimes relationships are affected, And sometimes the biggest cost comes from the decisions we choose not to make. And for me, Buddhism is not like religious in a sense, but for me it's more like how to. And it has always helped me think about this part of life more clearly, because Buddhism reminds us that everything begins with the mind, before speech, before action, before consequences. There is the mind. The way we think shapes the way we speak. The way we speak shapes the way we act. And our actions eventually create results. And we often talk about karma, not necessarily as punishment, but simply as understanding that actions carry consequences. And I think that awareness teaches us something important: to pause, to think carefully, to understand the possible consequences before moving forward, and to accept reality once those consequences arrive. We make choices believing in ourselves. Over time, life gives us signals when something is not longer aligned, and usually discomfort appears before understanding. So we pause, asking ourselves hard questions, remember our values, and decide whether continuing costs too much of who we are. And because life doesn't ask us to make perfect decisions, but perhaps it asks us to make conscious ones. And perhaps our understanding continues changing as life changes us. Sometimes I smile when my close friends joke that I'm a cat, not in a cute or lovely creature way, but that I seem to have 9 lives like a cat. And perhaps they have a point, because over the years, life has asked me to become many different versions of myself. There were years when I focused on building a career, years when responsibilities became heavier, years when I needed to lead, or years when I needed to support others, years when life taught me through success, and years when life taught me through loss. And looking back, I realized that life rarely moves in a straight line. Different seasons ask different things from us. There are seasons when we naturally want more progress, more opportunities, more growth. And sometimes those years require sacrifice. Peace may need to wait. Balance may need to wait, because responsibilities and priorities ask more from us. And I think that is simply part of life. Some years are difficult. Some years feel lighter. Some years bring visible progress. And some years may feel as though life itself has quietly paused for a while. But eventually, after living through enough seasons, I think many of us begin asking a different question. Not simply how much more can I achieve, but what is enough for me? sometimes I think this word can be misunderstood. When I talk about enough, I do not mean doing less, do not mean lowering our ambitions. I do not mean avoiding growth. I do not mean refusing to build a better life. Life moves in seasons, and different seasons ask different things from us. Sometimes striving harder is necessary. Sometimes responsibilities require more from us than we wish to give. And sometimes peace has to wait while we build something important. And I think that is perfectly fine, because understanding enough doesn't mean limiting ourselves. I think it means understanding clearly what all of our effort is meant to serve, because eventually we begin asking different questions, not simply how much more can I have, but rather, why am I pursuing this? What kind of life am I building? And does it align with what I truly value? And of course, I think the word enough means something different for all of us. And I'm certainly not suggesting that everyone should want the same life. Some people may dream of building large companies, a legacy, or some may want to travel the world. Some may feel happiest pursuing ambitious goals throughout their lives. And I think all of that is perfectly fine and perfectly valid. But for me, enough looks rather simple. A peaceful place to live, a healthy environment, good neighbors, small group of people I care about, friends who accept one another as we are, talking silly things, having conversation where we can speak honestly about almost anything, a life that feels light rather than complicated, and perhaps low maintenance too. Because I have learned something over the years. Complexity is expensive, not only financially, but emotionally too. But that is simply my versions of enough. Someone else may define it very differently, and I think that is perfectly fine too. Because perhaps the important question is not whether our lives look the same. The important question is whether we have taken enough time to understand what truly matters to us, and whether the life we are building feels aligned with who we truly are. For me, happiness and inner peace have always meant more than almost anything else. And perhaps that is what life has been teaching me all along. Not simply how to survive, not simply how to achieve, but how to understand what truly matters, how to live according to what we value, and perhaps most importantly, how to recognize what is enough. Because I think peace of mind doesn't come when we finally have everything. Perhaps peace of mind comes when we finally understand what is already enough for us. I hope you have a good day today, and thank you for spending your time with me. And until next time, take care.